Hey everyone, and welcome to the Nutrition Edge, where we dig into the science behind our nutrition. Ever wonder if the food we eat in rural parts of the world is as connected to our health as we think? Well, a new paper gives us a really interesting look. Today we'll explore how food insecurity and diet quality are impacting mothers and children in rural northeast Ghana. We'll see how they studied this, what they found, and what it might mean for all of us. With the important note that this research is a preprint, meaning it hasn't gone through the full expert review process yet. So the big question this paper is trying to answer is pretty fundamental in areas where food is scarce, meaning food insecurity. How does the quality of the food people do eat affect the health of mothers and their young children, especially in a place like Northeast Ghana, which is known to be particularly vulnerable? Now, how did they try to figure this out? The researchers went into the East Mamprusi municipality in Ghana and talked to 248 households. They used a couple of tools. One was the Household Food Insecurity Access Scale, or HEVAs, to understand just how insecure people felt about their food supply. Think of it as asking questions like, were you worried about not having enough food, or did you have to skip meals because there wasn't enough food? They also used something called the Diet Quality Questionnaire, or DQQ, to get a picture of what the mothers and their young children aged 6 to 59 months were actually eating over the past 24 hours. On top of that, they collected some basic health measurements like blood samples to check for things like anemia. And here's where it gets stark. The results were pretty eye-opening. A huge majority, 81.5% of the households they surveyed, were considered food insecure. That means nearly all of them were struggling with not having enough food or worrying about it. Only a small fraction, just 18.5%, reported being food secure. They also looked at what factors were linked to this food insecurity. Interestingly, having health insurance seemed to make a difference. Those without insurance were more likely to be food insecure. Also, the occupation of the father or male partner played a role. If the partner was a trader, they saw much lower rates of food insecurity compared to those who were farmers or in other jobs. Now, how does all this food insecurity tie into people's health? This is where it gets really important. The study found strong connections. Food insecurity was linked to lower hemoglobin levels in mothers, which is a sign of increased risk for anemia. It also meant less money was being spent on food for the family, and it was associated with poorer growth in children, specifically in terms of their height for their age and their weight for their height. This suggests that when families have less food or worry more about food, it directly impacts the physical development of mothers and children. Let's talk about diet quality. For the mothers, things weren't looking great. Only about 30% were eating from all 5 essential food groups. Their average dietary diversity score, which basically measures how many different types of food groups they ate, was around 4.45 out of a possible 10. While most ate vegetables, fruit intake was much lower. They also found that while mothers were getting a decent amount of healthy foods, there was also a concerning amount of sweet foods and sugary drinks being consumed. And this was true for children too. For the children, the picture was a bit mixed, but still concerning. Breastfeeding rates were very high, which is excellent cultural practice. However, when it came to complementary feeding, that is the food given to babies after about 6 months, it was another story. Only about 44% of children met the minimum dietary diversity, meaning they weren't getting a wide enough variety of foods, and even fewer, around 27%, met the minimum acceptable diet, which considers both variety and frequency of feeding. Alarmingly, a significant number of children, over 40%, were consuming sugar-sweetened beverages and sweet foods. What factors seem to make a difference for the children's diet quality? Similar to the mother's, monthly food expenditure was a huge factor. Families that spent more on food had children with better dietary diversity. Also, household structure mattered. Children in monogamous households tended to have better dietary diversity than those in polygamous households. And unsurprisingly, children in households with lower food insecurity scores, meaning their families felt more secure about food, also had better dietary diversity. So what does all this tell us? The study really highlights that in rural Northeast Ghana, food insecurity is a massive problem, and it's deeply connected to the health of mothers and young children. Not having enough food impacts mothers' ability to avoid anemia and children's growth. While breastfeeding is strong, the quality and variety of food given to young children as they grow is lacking. We're also seeing this worrying trend of unhealthy foods creeping in, even in areas struggling with getting enough to eat. The key takeaways really boil down to a few things. First, money matters. How much a household spends on food is a major driver of dietary quality for both mothers and kids. Second, household structure is also important. The study pointed to polygamous households having poorer dietary outcomes for both mothers and children, possibly due to how resources are shared. This is a sensitive point, but worth noting for interventions. And then there is health insurance, linking back to the earlier point that having it was associated with less food insecurity, perhaps by freeing up household funds that would otherwise go to medical costs. Now, it is crucial to remember the limitations. This was a cross-sectional study, which means it is a snapshot in time. They can show us that problems are happening together, but they can't definitively say that one thing causes another. For example, does food insecurity cause anemia? Or do mothers with anemia have less energy to secure food? It is hard to say for sure from this type of study. Also, people might not always be perfectly honest about their food security or diet. And importantly, this study was done in one specific municipality. So we can't automatically assume these findings apply everywhere in Ghana or even in similar regions. So wrapping it up, this paper really shines a light on the tough realities of food insecurity and its impact on nutrition in rural Northeast Ghana. While breastfeeding is a strong point, the complementary feeding and overall diet quality need a lot of attention. Addressing poverty and empowering women economically are highlighted as key. From a science communicator's perspective, this is precisely the kind of nuanced, real-world research that informs our understanding of global health. It reminds us that nutrition is not just about what is on our plate today, but about the complex web of economic, social, and cultural factors that shape food access and dietary choices, especially for the most vulnerable. As Tim Spector might say, it is fascinating how even in communities where we might expect a focus on abundant, whole foods, the pressures of food insecurity are pushing dietary patterns towards less diverse and potentially less healthy options. A pattern we see globally. This research underscores that understanding the unique barriers to diverse diets, like those faced by mothers in polygamous households or relying solely on farming, is key to developing truly effective, personalized nutrition strategies that go beyond simple dietary advice. So, what are your thoughts on this study? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this breakdown helpful, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to The Nutrition Edge for more deep dives into the science behind our health. See you next time.